Hi everybody, this is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and I was thinking that since several other presenters on chessvideos.tv like to present their Blitz games, why should I be any different? So, just to prove that I can play a decent Blitz game every once in a while myself, I'll show you the following game, which I think is quite interesting and really not just designed to show that I can actually play Blitz chess too. We all can play Blitz chess after all. Alright, so I had white. And at least in Blitz, I like to play this kind of anti-Taimanov-Paulson-Kahn move, knight c3. And if they play a6, then I can play d4, but I can also play g3 and just sidestep all the main lines, or at least the mainest of the main lines. So knight c6, and now we go into a Resourcefulness. Although, with the knight being on c3, maybe some of white's best options are taken away if black plays cleverly. Alright, so my opponent played knight to d4, I castled, a6, bishop d3, and then here the usual moves are knight e7, and sometimes knight takes f3. But my opponent played knight to c6, which is kind of a clever move. Probably the best move against this, or one of the best moves against this, is bishop to e2. But then the idea of this is to play d4, after which we're back into Taimanov after all. Black's wasted two moves with knight c6 to d4 back to c6, but white wasted two moves too because he went bishop to b5 to d3 to e2. So it's a push. It just means that both sides took two moves longer than usual to get to a familiar place. The alternative, if white wants to avoid the main line, is b3. And you just fianchetto and kind of take things from there. And we'll see that it's also useful for another reason in a moment. So I played rook to e1. I remembered that bishop to e2 was possible, but wanted to avoid that. And I knew about b3, but I had forgotten why it was important to play like that if I didn't want to play bishop to e2. So my idea is to play bishop f1 instead, and maybe still play d4, but there's also the possibility of fianchettoing. And also the bishop on f1 is out of the way, so there could be some knight to d5 jumps after d4, cd4, knight d4, and so on. The problem, though, as my opponent pointed out with his next move, is that there's g5. And this is really awkward. Where's my knight on f3 going to go? Now, this is why b3 is a nice move. So here on g5, well, I can move the knight out of the way, and then the long diagonal belongs to me. Well, bishop to b2 certainly can be played. And on bishop to g7, maybe knight a4. Anyway, none of that's available to me at this point. So here, I really had to stop and think what to do, and I spent about a minute and 40 seconds trying to figure out what to do, and then once I had an idea, trying to work it out. So let me suggest that you guys stop the recording at this point and try to figure out what white should do here. I mean, there are a number of options. There are varying degrees of attractiveness, but anyway, see what you can come up with. So, spend at least a couple of minutes and try to find something here. All right, well, I'll kind of give you a little bit of my thinking here about how I came to a decision. So I think in kind of a fleeting way, I thought about h3 for a moment, realized, of course, and I wasn't even really thinking about it, it was just sort of automatic. Okay, if I play h3, he plays h5, I haven't stopped anything, g4 is still going to come, and all I'm doing is weakening myself, just opening up lines for him in the process as well once g4 happens. So I started thinking, okay, well, maybe I should play rook to f1, which might make some sense. And on rook f1, then the idea is that on g4, I bring the knight back to e1, and then maybe I play f3 or f4. And if he doesn't take, then the pawn is at least kind of useful on f4. And if he does, then I get the f-file open for my own nefarious purposes. So it's possible. It's not fantastic, but it's a playable idea. Somewhat similarly, white could play king to h1. Clearing g1 for the knight. And that's not a fantastic square, but maybe from there it can go to e2 and to g3 or to f4 and find its way back into the game. All right. So I didn't like these backwards approaches. I mean, maybe, if you got to do it, you got to do it. But it would be nice to find other things. One interesting move I considered was h4. And the idea is after g4 to play knight to g5. But I didn't really feel like I would have very much after h6. For example, if takes, queen takes g4, well, you might think this is pretty good. I mean, I've got a couple of pawns for the piece. His king is out. and I have a lead in development too, but it seems that after knight f6, which is nice, hitting the queen, taking away queen h5, and then let's say queen f4, now d6, taking over the e5 square, I don't really think I have anything here. It's a serious advantage for black. Okay. A move I didn't consider, but that also makes some sense, is g3. This isn't bad either. But back to h4. Somehow I thought about h3 again after this, maybe, again, just feeling unhappy with all of the possibilities that I saw. And then I realized, okay, well, if h3, h5, maybe then I can play h4. So this all of a sudden kind of struck a little bit of a chord, because now, okay, on knight to g5, there's no h6. Now he can play f6. But then, all right, now things are starting to cook a little bit. I thought of, well, maybe e5, and I get this check on g6. Does this lead to anything? So knight to g5, f6, e5, f takes g5, bishop g6 check, king e7, and then, all right, d4. And then I'm threatening bishop takes g5 check, and if you protect it with bishop to h6, I have d5. And all of a sudden, the possibilities are multiplying. And it's getting more exciting, and there are all kinds of interesting ideas. My pieces are jumping all over the place, and his king is stuck in the center. This is great. I mean, this is what Tal used to say when he was asked, well, how do you decide when you should go for a sacrifice? And what he said, one of the things he said about this was that when he would calculate if the lines and the possibilities would start to mushroom, would start to grow, rather than, you just have a couple of straight line variations. But when the thicket would get denser and denser, and the possibilities seem to be more and more fecund, that's when he would go for it. So even if he couldn't see anything clear, just the fact that there were more and more possibilities becoming available to him, that was the green light, and he would go. He would sacrifice, and that's what I did. So everything that I just mentioned, I saw at this point, and actually happened. So h3, h5, h4, g4, knight g5, he plays f6, e5. Okay, so now white has definite compensation. He played f takes g5, bishop g6 check, king to e7, and now d4, threatening bishop takes g5 check, bishop h6, and there it is, d5. So this is the position that I had seen when thinking about my eighth move, and this is a very promising position for white. In fact, it may even just be objectively better. Now, I didn't know that, or didn't necessarily feel that during the game, but I certainly felt like I had tremendous possibilities here. And certainly compare this to some position where I make a groveling move like rook f1 or king h1 and then drop my knight back to the first rank. I mean, there's no comparison between how much or how little fun that would be with how much pleasure playing a position like this is by comparison. And also, I should say, going back a little bit to this point, black could also have considered f5. But on this, too, we can see that the possibilities start to really explode in white's favor. For instance, one idea might be knight to d5. And here, if e takes d5, bishop takes f5. And now bishop to g6 is possible, maybe e6 is possible. And all of a sudden, again, the white pieces are coming alive. Or maybe even better, maybe not, but it's interesting too, is bishop takes f5, e takes f5, and now knight to d5. Threatening knight f6 check, which would win back the piece, for starters. Maybe in some cases e6. Maybe even here e6 could be played, although I kind of doubt it. But even that could be considered at least. But knight to d5 looks pretty juicy as well. So this is promising too. I mean, black is not keeping the animals from breaking out of the barn here. So back to the game. Fg5 check here, d4 threatening bishop g5, so bishop h6, and now d5. And okay, what does black play here? All right, so I'm threatening to take on c6. Maybe d6 is threatened. Maybe taking on g5. Maybe knight to e4. So all kinds of possibilities. Also, okay, so not only this, but also in some cases de with the idea of queen d6. Of course, right now the black queen is covering that square in case of dc or de, and then the black pawn recaptures, but it's in the air. It's one of those things that can be possible. Another idea at some point might be bishop e3 and taking on c5 with a nasty bishop crisscross there. Again, not knight to f4, but knight to e4 or hg or bishop g5 or again some combination of these, all of this becomes a real burden for black to deal with. Maybe his best move here would be g takes h4. Just returning the piece, but taking away my control over g5 and opening the d file for his defensive purposes too. But still, after queen to e2, although white is down 2 pawns, the pawns are not significant here. I mean, the queenside pawn is an extra doubled c pawn for black, and for that matter, black's kingside pawns are doubled. The h5 pawn is under attack, and I'm also threatening all kinds of nice stuff here. I mean, for instance, knight to e4 is going to be very nice. I mean, the knight's hitting all kinds of great squares. Another idea is to play bishop h6, and then queen e3 when I'm hitting the c5 pawn and threatening queen to g5 check. Also, once I trade bishops, rook a to d1 is in the air. So this is not an easy life for black either. Well, in the game he played knight to d4, which makes sense. So this plugs up the d file, so there's no queen d6 stuff coming. And also, the knight is just not that badly placed there. It might come to f5 as well. Well, here I thought I had to stop and think again. I wasn't sure what to do at first. So one idea is to just take on g5. He has to retreat, let's say to g7, d6 check. Yeah, if he goes to f8, d6 is mate, so this is forced. And now here, maybe queen to d3 is possible, just bringing the queen into the action a little bit. Rook to e4 with the idea, or sorry, rook to e4 with the idea of rook to f4 is another possibility, or maybe even a take on d4, and then after queen d4, the queen threatens to go to f4, and there's no knight to block on f5. So that's also an interesting possibility. So this is actually quite good for white, but it felt a little blocked up. I mean, I wanted to keep things more fluid if I could. Another move I considered was knight to e4, and I wasn't sure what to do on g takes h4 though. Maybe knight to g5 is pretty good with the idea of knight to f7. So that's an idea that I didn't really consider so much in this game, the idea of playing knight g5 f7. Also possible, of course, is just to play c3 to reopen the file and ask the knight exactly what it's got in mind for the future. But I came up with a different approach, which is also good. I played bishop takes h5. And my idea is that I want to activate the queen. So I'm going to play queen takes g4 next, or at least in the near future, and add some of my pressure on the g5 square, and just get one more big piece into the attack. I mean, queen's the most powerful piece on the board, and so if she's involved in the attack too, black's days are numbered. Well, here my opponent played queen f8, which is not a bad move. At first I was a little bit annoyed about this because I thought, well, I could play d6 check too, but I didn't really like it. I mean, I thought the king would be okay on f8, he'd go to g7, but after queen f8, I wasn't so sure that I was happy about this. And then I thought, yeah, okay, this isn't so bad, because after d6 check, king d8, now I realize there's another problem for black. So, yeah, the king is away from the king side, but if I can get a check with the diagonal piece on this line, well, it's mating. And actually, it was kind of reminiscent. It reminded me of a game that that was really kind of disappointing. It was another Blitz game a few months ago where I had played some really very attractive sacrifice and combination, and it was just beautiful. And if I had just finished it right, I think I had a forced mate, and it involved a very similar kind of mating motif. I don't think I had a bishop on h5. I think maybe there was a black piece on e8, so he couldn't run away, and I had like queen h5, queen a5 winning, and missed it. So here I was kind of attuned to that idea, and so that was one of the things that was on my mind. So here I played knight to e4. And one idea now is, yeah, maybe I will play knight takes g5 since he can't recapture because bishop g5 will just win the house. But also I want to play c3 and maybe play queen to a4. Or maybe play queen to d2 here, or bishop to d2. Basically, I'm interested in opening up the line. Another idea is just to play knight takes c5 as well. All right, so here he played g takes h4. And now I've got more than one way to maintain a winning advantage. What I did that, but probably knight to g5 again would have been the most efficient, threatening knight f7. And again, bishop takes g5, bishop g5 check is just trivially easy for white. So queen f5 would have been the most resilient move here. And then bishop takes g4, queen c2, check here. prosaic stuff. I mean, this would be kind of boring, but it's good. So prosaic is fine if it's winning. So this would give white an extra exchange, but I like what I did better, frankly. So I played queen takes g4, and now I'm threatening bishop to g5 check. I'm threatening queen takes h4 check. Lots of good stuff here. So if for instance, knight takes c2, I play bishop h6, or knight to g5, or queen h4 check. And the point is, whatever way he recaptures, he dies. Queen h6, queen h4. And knight f6 is forced. I play knight f6 back, and there's just nothing good here. For instance, knight takes e1. And, well, what doesn't win here? Be a bigger challenge, I suppose, to find a move that doesn't just win. But anyway, basically knight e4. If queen f6 is mate. So that does the job. All right. Yeah, so queen takes h6 is worthless. If knight takes h6, then queen g5 is mate next move, however you want to do it. And on rook takes h6, I suppose this is the nominally best try, but again, it really comes to the same sort of thing. Here, probably knight takes f6 is good. E takes f6 is good, followed by f7. So this is just catastrophically bad for black. So yeah, let's say here, rook takes, pawn takes, knight takes, f7. Okay, let's be funny here and make a rook and mate. All right, everything wins here. So bishop takes h6 is crushing. Also, queen h4 is also knight to g5. Another try for black is bishop takes c1, but again, queen h4, knight e7, and now rook a takes c1, and I'm regaining the piece. So at least this time it's not an immediate or almost immediate mate, but white's going to be ahead of material with this tremendous bind. I mean, there's not even a rush for white to take on e7, because that would let black out of the box a little bit. So white will just continue to build sadistically, especially with black playing without his rook on a8, without the bishop on c8, and so on. All right, in the game my opponent played, I think, the right move, knight to f5. And here I made an inaccuracy, so I didn't play the best move here. As I said, I was pretty well taken by the idea of mating with a piece, with a diagonal piece on the a5 d8 diagonal. So along those lines, I played knight takes c5, which is not a bad move in its own right, but the problem is that there was better. So knight to g5 again is really effective, especially here. So this somehow didn't kind of eluded my grasp. I kept thinking how to put a bishop there and just didn't see the knight f7 point. So that would have been best. Bishop to g5 check is also good. And now I can just build rook a to d1 and take on e7 whenever I want. This is winning in the long run. But knight takes c5 is what I played, and this is not so bad. It has a very strong threat which my opponent missed. So what should black do? One very nice line is this. Okay, let's say he plays b6, because my idea here is to play queen to b4. And if he plays a5, I think queen to c4 will be strong there as well. So let's say b6. Now, if I play queen to b4 straight away, he has rook to b8. Everything's covered. But I have a neat move, queen to c4. Now, the threat here, well, I have two threats. Let's say he plays bishop takes c1. I can mate him with knight takes e6 check, followed by queen to c7 mate, or with knight to b7 check, again followed by queen to c7 mate. So black can stop these with rook to a7. All right, looks great, but now I play queen to b4. See, when I played queen to b4 straight away, there was rook to b8. Now the equivalent move, rook to b7, fails. I just play knight takes b7, and then queen takes b6, and then queen c7, checkmate. So that would have been a very nice way to finish. And in the game I won quite quickly as well. He played queen to g7, and then I played queen to b4, and that's just game over. I could have also played queen to c4. This would win too. So for instance, if bishop to c1, well again, we already saw this idea. And if he plays rook to b8, now I don't have knight e6 because the queen on g7 covers it, but I play knight takes a6, and again I crash through on c7 with a quick mate. I think all he has left are spite moves like knight takes d6, I play e takes d6, queen g2, king g2, h3 check, king h1, and then I deliver mate on c7. All right, so that would have won too. In the game I played queen to b4, this is even faster, and my opponent graciously allowed me to deliver the mate. So knight takes d6, e takes d6. Actually, this is even faster by one move if you exclude all the spite checks. Here, here, and then knight takes e6. So that's cute. But I just played e takes d6, and after b5, queen a5, mate, game over. So very, very nice, but two improvements for black. So first of all, after knight takes c5, if black had played bishop takes c1, then the game continues. Because first of all, I can't play queen to b4 because he has rook takes h5, and now he can run away to the e8 square. So I should play rook a takes c1, threatening queen to g5 check, so I'm at least always getting my material back there. And here he can combat this idea in two ways. One is to play queen h6, and now there's a funny little sequence. Okay, bishop f7, threatening to take on g8, so queen g7. Now bishop goes back to g6. I'm threatening queen to g5 again, and if he plays, for instance, b6, okay, I just play knight to d3, and I'm threatening bishop takes f5, and the attack is too much. So white is pretty close to winning here. Maybe it's not a dead win, but it's certainly a very nice advantage. After bishop c1, rook c1, rook a takes c1, that is, instead of queen h6, maybe black's best is rook takes h5, so returning some material. And here white has a rook and two pawns for two minor pieces. The black queen side is still pretty lousy. The knight on g8 is pretty lousy. But white's rooks aren't quite yet doing their job. So I do suspect that in the long run, white should probably be winning this, but there's still work to be done. And black can play b6 and bishop to b7 and rook c8. So he may not be quite so permanently constricted after all. So this definitely, even if it's winning for white, this certainly isn't as easy as knight to g5 would have been. That would have been very effective. But okay, this was at least more aesthetic in the long run, I suppose. But accuracy is good too. Of course, I was short on time by this point. Anyway, enough excuses. I should have seen knight to g5. Anyway, while this idea that I came up with was very, very nice, black could have found a nice response to it. So see again from here, so a kind of a follow-up challenge. See if you can think of a way for black to avoid that position that we get after d5, which is objectively better for white. So this absolutely black should avoid. So you might want to stop from here again and think how black can thwart this plan, best thwart this plan. Okay, well, there are probably numerous ways to do it, but I think the best way, I mean, there are ways that black can do it, but that don't give him an advantage either. So here, for instance, if black doesn't play h5, then I think white can just go about his business, retreat the bishop, play d4, or even d3, and stand reasonably well. Or maybe play e5 and knight to e4. So h5 I think is right. h4, and I think g4 is right, knight to g5. But here, this was key. Knight to e5 was the right move, stuffing white in here. So now I don't get to play e5, and now f6 is a real threat. Knight takes d3 might even be annoying in some cases, but really f6 is the big problem. So at this point, I probably have to play something like maybe f4, or drop the bishop back to f1 and then play for d4. And I think the position will still be interesting, but objectively, I think this is pretty good for black. Black should be somewhat better here. And I don't get to have all the fun that I do once I play e5. I mean, once I play e5, now lines just explode for my pieces. I mean, the e-file can open, the bishop goes to g6, the knight can go to e4, and I can breathe. My pieces get some space, which after a move like knight to e5, they remain cooped up. So that would have been a good move for him. But he kind of went with the flow there, which is what I was expecting to, and was, I guess, in a way counting on, but what I expected. I mean, it's the obvious principled move. You collect the knight. But an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as they say, and with knight to e5, he still got his threats, and I still have my unpleasantly cramped position. Okay, so I think there are a number of good lessons in there to be learned, and hopefully you also enjoyed the game. I certainly felt pretty happy about finding this idea. So even though, of course, black could have defended against it, it's still pretty cool to get from this point, I think, to this point. All right, let me get rid of all that stuff. So I felt pretty decent about the game. It's always nice when you get to sacrifice stuff and just fling your pieces at your opponent and have good things happen. All right, so that'll do it. I will see you next time, I'm sure, with a much calmer game than this. And probably we'll get back to the Ruy Lopez series, maybe cover the exchange variation next time. See you then. Bye-bye.